So this is actually a mini version. I did not have any leftover fabric, so just use your imagination with me. This is my 26-inch piece, and these are my two 14-inch pieces. So the front waistband and back waistband pieces. What you want to do is lay the front waistband piece with the right side facing up. Then you want to take your back waistband piece and you want to lay it with the right sides together. And make sure that the edge of the back waistband piece, this side does not have the notch. And this side does have the notch. And you will pin that in place. Then with your second back piece, you'll lay it with the right sides together, and also make sure that the notch is on this side and that there is no notch on this side. Alright, go ahead and line up the edge with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Lower your needle, begin sewing, back stitch. When you get to the end, back stitch. You want to sew the other side the same exact way, and then once you're done, for both sides, you're going to open up this seam and press it out. Go ahead and lay out your interfacing with the rough side facing up. So there's a smooth side and a rough side. The rough side is the glue dots, so make sure that this is facing up. Now take your waistband and go ahead and lay that with the wrong side is facing the glue dots, and the right side should be facing up. All right. Now go ahead and pin this in place. I'm going to keep adding additional pins on the outer edges, and then once I'm done pinning this down in place, I'm going to go ahead and cut this out. Next, flip your waistband over to the interfacing side, and once you're there, go ahead and transfer your pins over. Now, we don't want to iron over these, and I'm not taking all the pins over. I'm just transferring over enough to fit in the corners and a couple in the center. Alright, now on your iron, you want to change your setting to a wool setting, wool temperature setting, and go ahead and turn the steam on. Now what you want to do is take a pressing cloth. Now this is just some muslin, but if you have some, like a scrap piece of fabric that can withstand heat, you can use that. So what you want to do is lay your pressing cloth on top, and then you want to go ahead and hold down your iron for about 10 to 15 seconds, and you're holding it down. You're not moving the iron like this. You're just holding it firm in place. Then you move it over, holding it firm in place, and you can press your steam button if you have one. And you're doing that for 10 to 15 seconds. And then you would keep continuing the same process all the way down the waistband. Right. Now that our interfacing is fused, go ahead and turn. So find where you made, on the waistband, where we made that notch. It's a little tricky for me to find mine. I went ahead and just marked it with my fabric pencil. So we're going to be working on the opposite side of where we made that notch. So go ahead and turn it over to the interfacing side. And once again, we're working on the side that is unnotched. So there's no notch on this side here. Take your index card or your seam gauge, and we're going to hem this edge. We'll turn it over. So to make this line on my index card, what I did was I just measured up a 1/2 inch and then I drew a line. So along this edge here, we're going to turn up our fabric to that 1/2 inch mark. And then you're going to take your iron and press. And you're going to do that along the whole edge, that does not have the notch. Alright, go ahead and lay out your front skirt panel piece. Make sure that the right side is facing up. And I'm looking at the top edge here. So what you want to do is go ahead and grab your pocket pattern, your pocket pieces, and you want to lay these right on top, making sure that the right side of your pocket is now touching the right side of your skirt piece, and making sure that the right side is touching the front piece. Go ahead and grab your sewing pins, and we're going to pin this in place. Alright, go ahead and lay out your back skirt panel pieces and make sure that the right side is facing up. Grab your 2 pockets and we are going to lay these with the right sides together. Now remember, on our back skirt panels we made a mark for our zipper stop. So you want to work on the opposite side. You're attaching your pocket on the opposite side of your zipper mark. So here I have my zipper marked here. I'm working on the opposite side to attach my pocket. Then go ahead and grab your pins and pin this in place. Alright, go ahead and line up the edge of your skirt with the edge of your presser foot. Lower your needle, begin sewing, and backstitch, and keep sewing all the way down till you reach the end of the pocket. Once you reach the end of the pocket, go ahead and backstitch. Alright. Once you have your pockets attached, you will open it up and you will press the pocket open just like this. And right now I'm looking at the right side of my skirt panel, the front piece, and it's facing up. Next, what you'll do is you'll take one of the back pieces and you're going to lay it right sides together. So making sure that the right side of the back panel is touching the right side of the front panel. Alright, Next, what you want to do is go ahead at the top of your pocket pattern. We made a clipping. What you want to do is find that clipping that you made and you want to pin there. And then we also made a notch down at the bottom of our pocket. You want to go ahead and place a pin there. Next, what you want to do is pin along the edge of your skirt. Then you want to pin all around your pocket. Alright, so now we're getting ready to sew these two pieces together. So first we're going to start at the bottom of our skirt. We're going to sew all the way up until we get to the pin that we have marking the notch in our pocket. Then we'll sew around and stop here. Then to close up our pocket, we'll start at the top of our skirt and we will sew down till we get to the top notch in our pocket. Alright, let's go ahead and do that. Alright, starting at the bottom of our skirt, we're going to use a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance to sew up our side seam. So go ahead and lower your needle, begin sewing, backstitch, and now we're going to sew all the way up until we get to our pocket. So now I am approaching the bottom notch in my pocket. We are going to continue sewing all the way up until we get to this pin. And then I am going to do a back stitch and then sew again forward. Then I'm going to leave my needle in there. I'm going to raise up my presser foot, and now I'm going to turn the pocket. Then go ahead and lower your presser foot back down. Now we're going to keep sewing at a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. So I have my pocket lined back up with 5/8 of an inch, and we're going to sew around the pocket. Now as you're sewing, you want to apply pressure and pivot your pivot this pocket and turn to go around the curve. And then once you reach the top, go ahead and backstitch. I'm going to finish off my pocket using my pinking shears. Now I'm using these pinking shears to cut only in the seam allowance, and I'm trimming about 1/4 of an inch away from the edge. You can also use these pinking shears to finish off any raw edges. Alright, looking at the top edge of the skirt, you're going to line up the skirt seam allowance with 5/8 of an inch. Go ahead and lower your needle. Begin sewing, back stitch, and we're going to sew all the way down until we get to our the notch that we made for the top of our pocket. Once you get to that pin, go ahead and back stitch and stitch forward again and back stitch. Alright, on my center back pieces, from the top until I got to that large dot that I made for my zipper, I went ahead and applied some interfacing. It's about a 1/2 inch wide, and I just I put it starting at the top of the skirt down to where the zipper stop is, and I did that on both of the center back pieces on the wrong side. Alright, looking at the wrong side of your skirt, this is the front skirt panel. You want to make sure that your side seams on both sides are going towards the front of your skirt. Next, what you want to do is we need to pin this pocket down in place. So go ahead and grab a pin and just right along the top, pin your pocket down to the front skirt panel. That way when we get ready to do our basting stitch along the top, this pocket won't be moving. You'll remember which direction it's going in. So both pocket patterns should be facing towards the front. Alright, so we're getting ready to do 3 sets of basting stitches. So the first set of stitches, we're going to start at our center back, and then we're going to sew until we get to our side seam. Alright, I went ahead, I'm starting from the center back. I'm starting about 5/8 of an inch away, and then I have my fabric lined up with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So what you want to do is turn to the longest stitch on your machine, and I went ahead and changed the color of my thread so that if I have to end up using my seam ripper, I can identify the threads quickly. So go ahead and lower your needle, and you want to begin sewing. We are not going to back stitch. So continue sewing all the way until you get to the side seam. Once you get to the side seam, go ahead and back stitch. And we are going to repeat this process. This time we're going to line up our fabric with 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. So you want to begin sewing and do not back stitch. And you want to continue sewing until you get to the same spot in your side seam. Once you get to that same spot, go ahead and back stitch. Next, we're going to run some basting stitches along the top from side seam to side seam. So in between both of the pockets, we'll run some basting stitches for gathering. Alright, now it's time to sew the gathers for the front part of our skirt. Now go ahead and lower your needle. Make sure your fabric is lined back up with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And we're going to begin sewing right where we left off with our other gathering stitches. So go ahead and start sewing, backstitch, and we're going to continue sewing all the way until we get to the other side seam. Alright, when you get to the other side seam, do not backstitch. Raise your needle, lift up your presser foot, and pull your threads so that you have enough to be able to pull for your gathers. Alright, and we're going to repeat the same process. This time we're going to line up the edge of our fabric with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And we are going to begin our stitches right where we left off with our other gathering stitches. So go ahead and start sewing, backstitch, and continue sewing until you get to the other side of the side seam. Once you get to the other side seam, once again, do not backstitch. Raise your needle, lift your presser foot, and pull your threads so that you have a long tail of threads coming out. Then we will finish off our gathering stitches from this side seam to the center back. Alright, and now where we just left off, go ahead and move those threads out of your way at the top and at the bottom. Push them out of your way. And right where we left off, not sewing on top of these threads, but right about here, I'm going to begin sewing my last set of gathers. So go ahead and line up your fabric with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Lower your needle, begin sewing, backstitch, and sew all the way until we get to the center back. And then once you're about 5/8 inch away from meeting the edge, go ahead and stop. Do not backstitch. Lift up your needle and your presser foot and pull out your threads. So as you can see, I stopped my gathering stitches because we don't want to have any gathers in our zipper area. Alright, let's go ahead and repeat this process one more time. Where we left off from our previous gathers, we're going to now line up our fabric with 1/4 inch seam allowance. Go ahead and begin sewing, backstitch, and continue sewing until we get to the center back. And once again, I'm leaving about 5/8 inch away from the edge And I'm going to lift up my needle, raise my presser foot, and pull my threads. Alright, to make your gathers, go ahead and find the sides where we did not backstitch. And you'll notice that we have a total of 4 threads. What you want to do is grab 2 of those threads, making sure that the 2 that you grab are coming out from the same side. So I'm grabbing the 2 that are here on top. What you want to do is to begin to pull these threads with one hand, and you'll see that they start to make these gathers. Then with your other hand, you want to pull them in the opposite direction. So you're pulling with one hand, and then you're taking the other hand and distributing those gathers. So I'm going to continue pulling. And you want to be gentle because you do not want to break this thread. And I'm pushing my gathers all the way over until I can't anymore, because that's where we backstitched. So I'm pulling all of the gathers. I'm distributing them all the way over, just moving them. And then I'm going to continue gathering. Now go ahead and repeat this process for our front panel piece, and then lastly for the back panel piece. Made our large dot in the center, so that's the opposite side that we folded up. You want to match this large dot in the waistband with the large dot at the top of the skirt. And then you want to pin there. Now we need to adjust our gathers. So with me, I went ahead and gathered the maximum that I could, but I didn't need to gather as much. So what I'm going to begin to do is release some of these gathers so that each side lines up with my waistband. So right now I gathered too much here. So I need to let out enough gathers so that these 2 ends meet up. Next, I'm just releasing some of my gathers so that my waistband will match up to the top of my skirt evenly. But if you did yours in reverse, maybe you didn't gather enough, you can pull your gathering threads a little bit more so that your waistband matches up evenly with the top of your skirt. Make sure you have an even amount of gathers on both sides of the waistband. Right here is where I'm checking manually just by hand to see that my waistband lines up with the top of my skirt. As I was distributing my gathers, I moved my waistband down just a little bit so that I could have freedom to move my gathers in the front. And now I am repinning the waistband back in place. Now to double check my work, I'm pinning the waistband to the skirt. Now I'm not going to sew right away. I'm just making sure that everything is even. Once you have pinned your waistband to your skirt and you see that it's even, now we can go ahead and tie off our gathers. So find those threads that we still have. And I'm just going to cut them down a little bit before I tie them off. And then with those threads, go ahead and tie them so that your gathers do not come loose when we get ready to distribute them evenly. So I'm just making a few knots, tying the 2 pieces of thread together. And then I just trimmed them down a little bit farther now that I have my knots made. So I tied these two together, and then I tied these two together on the opposite side. So I'm going to also do that with my stitches over here. Now that we have tied off our gathering stitches, we can go ahead and remove all the pins from the top of our waistband. And now we can begin to distribute our gathers evenly across the top, making sure they're even all the way around, all across the top. And then as soon as you have them exactly how you would like for them to look, nice and even, you can go ahead and pin your waistband back in place and be ready to sew. Alright, go ahead and switch your thread back to your original color if you switched yours over to make your gathering stitches, and also be sure to change your stitch back to your regular standard stitch, because trust me, in the past I have definitely sewn this whole waistband and it was still on the basting stitch, so make sure you change it back. Alright, now line up your waistband with 1/2 inch seam allowance. Go ahead and lower your needle. Begin sewing, back stitch, and continue sewing. And as you are sewing over your gathers, be sure to glide them through evenly. Make sure that I like to, as I'm going through, just make sure that my fabric is laying. I like to rest my hand here to guide my gathers through evenly. Alright, when you get to the end, go ahead and back stitch. Alright, next we need to trim our seam allowance. So we have the gathers and then we have the waistband part. We're going to trim down the waistband part. So you can push the gathers forward and then take your scissors, and you want to trim to about 1/4 inch. So trimming the waistband seam allowance to about 1/4 inch. You're going to do that across the entire waistband. Just trimming this seam allowance down, and that's going to cut the bulk in our waistband. Alright, next go ahead and press this seam allowance going up towards the waistband. Alright, go ahead and turn your skirt to the right side. If you see any of your basting stitches, you can take your seam ripper and you can go ahead and begin to cut those, pull those threads up. So be nice and gentle so you don't cut into your fabric. So you'll look across your whole waistband and pull up any exposed gathering stitches. Or you can look at the wrong side, and since if you use a different color, you can go ahead and use your seam ripper to cut out the basting stitches on the other side. Alright, next it's time to sew our skirt up at the center back. So go ahead and at the back of your skirt, put the right sides together, and you want to, right where the waistband seam is, you want to line up those two seams together and you want to place a pin there. You also want to find those 2 notches that we made in our waistband. You want to line up those 2 notches and place a pin there. You also want to find the large dots that we made to mark our zipper stop, and you want to line up those 2 dots and you want to place a pin there. Alright, next go ahead and fill in some pins here. And then also go ahead and pin down the rest of the center back. Next, we're going to take this to our machine and we're going to do a basting stitch from the notch we made in our waistband all the way down to the notch that we made to mark our zipper stop. And then right here is where we will transition our stitch. We'll go from a basting stitch and then we'll turn our machine back to our regular stitch length and stitch the rest of the way down. Alright, go ahead and lower your needle in the waistband area where we made the notch, and we're lining up our skirt with 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. And you go ahead and make sure your Make sure you're on a basting stitch. Alright, begin sewing. You do not need to backstitch. And we're sewing all the way down until we get to our zipper stop point where we made the large dots. Alright, once you get to the point where your large dots are, go ahead and turn your machine back to your regular stitch length. And then go ahead and begin sewing. Back stitch, sew again, back stitch, and now continue sewing all the way down. Alright, when you get to the end, go ahead and back stitch. Now you can take this to your ironing board and go ahead and press the seam open. Alright, next go ahead and grab your zipper and open it up. And now you're going to take it to your iron, and what you want to do is right here where the zipper teeth are, we need to press this open. So turn your iron to a synthetic setting, and then what you want to do is push back the zipper teeth, and you want to press it open all the way down. So what you'll do is you'll push open the zipper teeth and press, and you're going to do that on both sides of the zipper. Alright, now that your zipper is pressed out, right now I'm looking at the right side. I can see the zipper pull tab. What you want to do is go ahead and turn it so that it's now facing the wrong side. Now what you want to do is on your skirt, so right now I'm looking at the center back seam that we just sewed. You want to take your zipper, and right here where on the zipper where there's, well, mine is clear plastic but yours might be metal, but using this piece right here, I'm going to line that up with the notch that I made in the waistband. And then I'm going to pin in place. Now make sure that your zipper teeth are going towards the seam. And then what you want to do is continue pinning your zipper all the way down until you get to the large dot that we made. And you want to make sure that your teeth are aligned with this seam. And right at my large dot, I'm going to put a pin going the opposite way to signal for myself to stop. Alright, go ahead and switch your regular presser foot and put your zipper foot on. Alright, and because I did start on the left side of the zipper, and because I started on the left side of the zipper, I'm going to start at the base of the zipper and then sew up to the top. I like to do this because it feels more comfortable for me when I'm sewing the left side of my zipper to start at the bottom and work my way up to the top. So what I went ahead and did was put some pins in my skirt to hold it in place so that it doesn't roll up on the other side. Because when you're sewing your zipper, you're only sewing in the seam allowance only. There's no fabric under this zipper. I'm on the seam allowance only. Alright, these first set of stitches that we're making are just to baste the zipper down in place. And make sure as you are sewing that the zipper teeth are aligned with the center of the seam. Now because I'm starting on the left side of my zipper, I'm starting down at the bottom at the large dot, and I'm working my way up to the top where that notch is in the waistband. Once you make it to that notch at the top of the waistband, you can go ahead and stop sewing. Alright, go ahead and pin the other side of your waistband the same exact way. And make sure when you begin pinning that your zipper stop is, and make sure when you pin the other side, make sure that the zipper stop at the top, make sure that those two pieces match up. Alright, just go ahead and run a basting stitch starting at the top of the zipper And just run a basting stitch to hold this zipper in place. You're going to keep basting this zipper in place until you get to that large dot, marking our zipper stop. Alright, now go ahead and find those basting stitches that we made to sew up our center back seam. So remember, we started at the notch and we went all the way until our large dot down at the bottom, and then we transitioned to a regular stitch. We need to, so from that point from where you back stitch to go into a regular stitch all the way up, we need to take out those basting stitches. And sometimes it might even be easier just to cut it from right in between the zipper. So be careful not to cut your fabric. Now we're going to sew right here in our zipper, and you want to make sure you're pushing back the teeth so that you can get close to your zipper teeth, but don't sew on your zipper teeth. So we're going to sew in here. So go ahead and lower your needle. Begin sewing. Back stitch. You're going to continue sewing all the way down until you get to that large dot marking our zipper stop, and then you will back stitch. Alright, next go ahead and begin to pull the zipper tab up. Alright, and you can take this to your machine, and still on that cool iron setting, you want to, on that synthetic iron setting, you want to press on top of this zipper. Alright, to finish off this zipper that we have left, what you want to do is take a hand needle, and only in the seam allowance, you want to hand tack this the zipper down on both sides. So I'm just doing a few stitches in and out, and I'm going to keep doing that here and here, doing a few hand stitches. Alright, looking at the waistband, I'm on the right side. You want to go ahead and fold your waistband in half, making sure that notch that we made is right here in the center, and you want to pull that zipper tape make sure it's coming out, and you want to make sure that the folded edges of the waistband match up. So the folded edge here matches the folded edge here. Then you want to go ahead and pin that in place. Next, we're going to run a stitch right along here. Alright, I still have my zipper foot on. So we're going to sew as close to these zipper teeth as possible, but make sure you do not stitch on these teeth. Go ahead and lower your needle. Begin sewing, backstitch, and you're going to sew all the way down until we get to the bottom of our folded edge. When you get to that point, backstitch. Next, we want to go ahead and trim this corner. And then you will turn it to the right side facing out. Alright, next, to finish off the waistband, you want to go ahead and grab your peel and stick tape. You'll take your peel and stick tape, you'll lay it right on your fabric, and I've laid it inside of the seam line. Then you want to go ahead and smooth it in there. Then you want to go ahead and rip off the white part. Then you'll take your waistband and you're going to close it. And you'll do that all the way around. Alright, looking at the bottom edge of your skirt, make sure that the wrong side is facing up. We're getting ready to hem. So what you want to do is, if you're using your index card, go ahead and measure up 5/8 of an inch and draw a line. Next, what you'll do is make sure that the wrong side of your fabric is facing up. You want to take the bottom edge and you want to fold it up to meet that 5/8 of an inch line. And then you want to take your iron and you want to press. And you're going to do that around the whole entire edge. And then once you have pressed it one time, what you want to do is then open it up and you want to fold the edge to meet that crease, and then you will fold it in again and take your iron and press. This will help you to have a clean finish on the inside. Alright, once you have your garment hemmed, go ahead and turn your skirt to the right side and then line up the bottom edge of your skirt with the presser foot. Go ahead and lower your needle. Begin sewing, backstitch, and you're going to sew all the way around until you get back to this point, and you will backstitch again.